You can have Jim Lap Bap.
I've decided I'm going to make my own video about the NPB. So who am I, you say? Well, if you read the title. I'm American by passport, but I grew up in Japan. My first Japanese baseball game was in 1987, and my last one was 2018. And I'm estimating maybe about 300 games, covering all 12 or 13 teams that are in Japan and about 20 different stadiums. You can see the list now. That also doesn't include the countless hours I've watched Japanese baseball in Japan on TV when it was on, and I played a lot of video games too on the old Famicom Nintendo Entertainment System and Super Famicom, the Super NES. So I thought maybe I'd just give you a sort of insider-ish perspective of Japanese baseball from someone who is native English speaker. I figured what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you a little rundown of every team. We'll go from north to south, starting with the Central League and then ending with the Pacific League. I know I don't have the in-depth knowledge of teams other than the Hawks, because that's the team I grew up watching. So I may not get things completely right, or if I've insulted your team or overgeneralized your team, I'm sorry, but I'm trying to get everyone in here, and this is generally geared towards those who don't know Japanese baseball that well. So first, a little guide how the teams are named. Most of them have three parts to their team name. First is their geographical area, their region, or sometimes it's their region, sometimes it's the city. The second is the company that owns them. In this case, SoftBank is the company. And then the third is their nickname, like they have in the US. With a few exceptions, you go by two names. It's the company name and then the team name. Let us start with the Central League. The Central League does not use the DH, so they're kind of like the National League. And none of their teams have really moved around like the Pacific League. So they're generally the more traditional league and have more attendance overall. First up, the Yomiuri Giants. I'm kidding. Well, no, I'm not kidding. Sorry. No offense to actual Giants fans out there. But this is the powerhouse, the dominant team, practically the national team. They have the most Japan Series victories, 22 out of 71 years. And at one point they won 9 in a row, 9 Japan Series in a row from 1965 to 1973. And they've been in the Japan Series and won the Japan Series at least once per decade since it started in 1950. The company is owned by Yomiuri, which is a national newspaper and TV conglomerate. Basically, all Giants home games are broadcast nationwide, so that's why they're a national team in some way. Their home games are almost always sold out. They are the team in one of the largest cities in the world, Tokyo, so very similar in stature to the Yankees in the United States. Interestingly enough, they are currently on an 8-year drought of winning the Japan Series. The last time they won was 2012. For the anti-Giants of us out there, we're hoping that streak continues, but of course, no personal offense meant to Giants fans. They're also the last Central League team to win the Japan Series in 2012. Every team who has won the Japan Series since has been from the Pacific League. For famous former players, Sadaharu Oh is probably the most famous. He has the Japan record for home runs of 868. It was aided by a relatively small stadium, but that's still quite a feat, and he had 130 game seasons to do it. There's no doubt he would have been successful if he played in the majors, but of course he probably wouldn't hit 800 home runs, but he was so far above everyone else in home run power. Interestingly enough, there is a person on the Giants whose nickname is Mr. Giants, and it's not O. It's actually Shigeo Nagashima, who was a third baseman. Shigeo Nagashima broke onto the scene and just put up crazy, insane numbers in his first couple of years. He ended up hitting .305 with 444 home runs for his career, and he retired, interestingly enough, the year after the Giants broke their consecutive championship streak. I don't know if it was intentional. He is an icon, and if you ever look at the Tokyo Dome, there's an advertisement with his face plastered on a billboard, so that's how much of a big deal he is. Now, the Giants actually existed before the current NPB, which was 1950, and they had a Russian-born pitcher named Viktor Starfin, who played in 1939. He threw 38 complete games among 41 starts. And then there's also a pitcher named Eiji Sawamura, who is basically the Cy Young / Sandy Koufax of Japan. He was very dominant, but his arm gave out and he was killed in World War II. Of course, Japan was a little different back then in World War II. The award for pitching is named after him, the Sawamura Award. So for current players, there's Hayato Sakamoto. I'm doing these in the American order, the given name and the last name. Now in Japan, they do the names, family name, given name. So if you're hearing it in Japanese, they'd say Sakamoto Hayato. But I'm doing Western order, just to let you know that. So Sakamoto hit 41 home runs last year. He's the shortstop. There's also Tomoyuki Sugano. He's pretty much the ace. He throws kind of everything in the kitchen sink and has a career 2.36 ERA. The Tokyo Dome is pretty much a hitter's park, so that's pretty good. Last year he had a kind of an off year at 3.89 ERA. Now I have actually never been to a Giants home game in the Tokyo Dome because they're hard. They're difficult to get into. But I've been to games in spring training or interleague games, so I have seen them play. They are easily the most loved and most hated team in Japan. Now I, of course, fall in the line of not liking the Giants, but they are hated to the point where there are actually parodies of their team song, which can be pretty crude, with accusations of wind-blown indoor home runs, bribing, and a final plea for them to drop dead. So it can be pretty harsh in their parodies.